When life gets unpredictable, preparation matters. In medicine, it's all about staying alert, ready for whatever comes through the door. On the road, it's no different. That's why Volvo designs vehicles to help anticipate risk, reduce harm, and protect lives. The Volvo XC90's advanced safety systems inspire confident decisions wherever the road takes you. The Volvo XC90, for life. Proud sponsor of the Pit Podcast. Learn more at volvocars.ca/safety.
Let's get to Terry Mosher. You know him and love him as Aislin. Now, Montreal in the 60s and 70s, a city that felt like the center of the universe, from Expo 67 to the arrival of Major League Baseball, and then the 1976 Summer Olympics. This city was buzzing with ambition and confidence about its future. Longtime Montreal Gazette cartoonist Aislin is revisiting that moment in time with a new book. It looks back at that excitement, the politics, and the controversies. It's our pleasure to welcome him back onto the program. Terry, thanks for coming on.
Yes, my pleasure.
The book called Aislin's 1976 Montreal Olympic Scrapbook, Jean Drapeau's Baby. And I got to say, Aislin, Terry, you know, that subheadline there, Jean Drapeau's Baby, it's the perfect thing for this book, because the one thing I kept saying is like, this is almost the story of Drapeau as another way of looking at this book.
Well, it is, and you know, there was an English biography on him, but I discovered there wasn't any great French biography on him, and even that one was written in 1980, so it didn't cover a lot of the post-Olympic stuff that went on in terms of the controversy and this, that, and the other. So I sort of turned it into a salute, but also a thumbing of the nose at Jean Drapeau, who, there's no question about it, he was our greatest ever mayor. Do you know there's only one statue to one mayor of Montreal in all of Montreal? And it's of Jean Drapeau. I took a photo of him outside of City Hall watching the comings and goings. It's just a terrific statue.
If you could you describe, especially to our younger audience, why Jean Drapeau was perfect for your line of work when it comes to cartoons?
Well, for one thing, it was very easy to draw. It was like drawing an egg, and then you put glasses on the egg, and then a scraggly little mustache, and you had a caricature of Jean Drapeau. But we all loved him. And remember, too, it was the heyday of political cartooning in Montreal. And from 67 through 76 in the Olympics, he had 8 cartoonists watching him every day. And so It was a wealth of material. It's not only my stuff in there, Elias. It's cartoons by a whole bunch of other people who were cartooning at the time, and their comments on them. And we loved him. We didn't hate him, but he was surely an ambitious guy, so he was easy to cartoon in terms of the policy he had. But we loved him just as what a mischievous guy he was.
Well, I wanted to get into the research that was involved here because, you know, and for our listeners that haven't seen the book, this is not like you open up the book and it's just page after of cartoon and then another cartoon and then another cartoon. There's the archival photos that, like you mentioned, not just your work, your fellow cartoonists from the time. How much work was involved?
8 months of very solid work. And I had the idea for a couple of years. I knew how this evolved was I knew it was coming up, the 50th anniversary of the Olympics. And I knew a lot of people would be interested in a book, particularly older readers. And everybody you talk to, even as children, they have memories of the Olympics or about their grandfather. You know, buy this book for your grandfather if you're 25 or something. And it's really, truly... it was a memorable occasion on so many different levels in Montreal. So I began to discover that originally it was just going to be a collection of the sketches that I did during the Olympics because I was all over the place for the Gazette. But then I began to go sort of backwards and forwards, saying, wait a minute, I should be mentioning this. I should be mentioning when he was first elected as mayor, how he couldn't do any wrong in the 1960s. I mean, he was elected. He put in a subway. He put in Place des Arts. He created downtown, in effect, that created the underground city as a result. And then the crowning achievement, Expo 67, and then brought the Expos in, he couldn't do any wrong. He began to trip up with the Olympics.
So let's get into that, right? Like, when did you start to say to yourself, uh-oh, things aren't going well, and the guy that could do no wrong is starting to do things that were going wrong?
Almost right away, when it was announced in 1970 that we were getting the Olympics, and of course the whole town celebrated. But I was a little dubious about it, with one thing and another. Then we had the October crisis and a couple of other things like that kind of got in the way. They didn't stop Jean Drapeau, but there were sort of warning signals, and like, what kind of pollution was this going to create? And how much was, originally he said it was going to cost a couple of $1 million or something.
Jeez.
And, that began to escalate, and he began to sort of cover up on that. And then the corruption that went on was unbelievable. A lot of rich people in Drapeau were getting contracts to build parts of the stadium. The contracts were falling apart. The unions were in terrible shape. They threw some of the union leaders. So leading up to the actual Olympics, there was scandal after scandal after scandal. And of course, I was drawing cartoons on that. But let's be fair, the Olympics themselves were a marvelous event. And I think I show that in my sketches, the celebratory sketches of the different athletes taking part in that sort of thing.
And that's why there's so many various phases of the book, right? And then you get to the celebration of 76 and pulling it off. But I want to push forward to chapter 5, which you aptly title The Hangover. And I guess that's when we start to say, uh-oh, what have we done? Talk to me about your work during the hangover period.
Well, here's the thing. Shortly after, it was a phenomenal year when you think about it, because shortly after the Olympics were over, the Parti Québécois was elected with René Lévesque. And so the responsibility for covering this huge Olympic cost shifted to the Parti Québécois, and they weren't too happy about that because they hadn't. In any case, they created this inquiry. There was huge news at the time, and it was a look at what had happened. And they came out solidly a few years later, criticizing Jean Drapeau, and he refused to answer it. So that created tons of cartoons. CJAD and La Presse almost ran a daily front-page cartoon asking him, "Where's your response to the Malouf Inquirer, Monsieur Maire?" And so we had a heyday with that stuff. And, he was an arrogant guy, had always had his own way, and then suddenly had become very, very defensive. So that's all in the book. But let me tell you, Elias, it comes right up to the present day because the controversy about the Olympic Stadium continues. Yep. It's going to cost, another $1 billion to fix that damn thing?
We're doing it right now. We certainly are.
Yeah, and so it just continues. The saga continues. So I have contemporary cartoons by other cartoonists on their take, and this is, I think, a very funny part of the book. I don't know if you got that part.
I did, and
how cartoonists, it's almost become a meme, how cartoonists suggest what to do with the stadium, everything from blow it up to turn it into a daycare center. That's a hilarious section of the book, really.
It's funny because, when you talked about how it was easy to draw Jean Drapeau, and that's one of the reasons why he was such good fodder for you and your colleagues at the time. Also look at Olympic Stadium in the same way, right? It is an iconic structure. It must be fun to draw, which is part of the fun of doing cartoons on it.
It is, and it's become this sort of dinosaur monster in a lot of people's minds about just sucking up money, and it never became the center it was supposed to become down there.
Do you have a thought or two on whether or not, based on everything you've covered over the years, if Montreal should try it again? Should we try and host an Olympics, a winter or a summer, one more time?
Well, we can't even afford to host the World Cup. How can we possibly afford to, Mayor Plante backed off on that one. I think the current mayor has sort of made polite noises about possibly Olympics, but we can't afford it. We just can't afford it. We're the most heavily taxed community in all of North America, and a lot of it has to do with the Olympic Stadium. Anyway, it's a wonderfully complicated place in Montreal. I'm very proud of this book, by the way.
Well, you should be. Aislin, listen, to wrap up here, I'm going to tell everyone, this book is a triumph. The way you put that era together, not just Olympics, but what came before and after, it's a great way to understand this city. Even if you, like, I'm a little bit too young to have gone through the Olympics. I wasn't alive when the Olympics happened. But you understand this city so well after engrossing yourself in your book. So I tell you, you've done some great work.
It's odd. I'm the longest working political cartoonist in North America now. I've been around a long time.
Wow.
And also, it's just so much of Montreal. So a few years ago, I began doing it. I did the 50th anniversary of the 1972 Canada Hockey Rush Series.
Yeah.
And then I did the anniversary of the Expos. And so I seem to be turning into this mini pop historian, if you will, about things I remember, particularly in cartoons.
And I think we all know that these cartoons, they're just a perfect way of looking back at how people were reacting to news stories when they actually happened, right?
Yes, well, it's very much a populist art form. You're not drawing to police the politicians. You're drawing cartoons to sort of voice what popular opinions are about it. And that means that we get away with thumbing at our noses at a lot of these people.
Yeah.
But, I must stress that I love the guy, Jean Drapeau, anyway, but it was a perfect example of a satirist taking on a particular situation.
Terry,
could I mention that the book is being launched? I'm appearing at the Irishman of the Year breakfast on Saturday. This coming Saturday, we're going to be selling books there and talking about the book. But then on the afternoon at the Atwater Library, I'm going to be there with a lot of Gazette people. You know where the Atwater Library is, right on Atwater, obviously. And so from about 2 until 5, I'm going to be there selling books and talking to people and that sort of thing.
This Saturday, 2 to 5, Atwater Library.
Yes, that's
Perfect.
Right. So if people want to drop by and say hello, have a cup of coffee, and chat about their memories of the Olympics, and hopefully buy a book,
Perfect. Terry, thank you for coming on. I'm directing everyone to this book, Aislin's 1976 Montreal Olympic scrapbook, Jean Drapeau's Baby. Take care.
For short, we just call it Jean Drapeau's Baby.
Jean Drapeau's Baby right here, and boy, is it a terrific piece of work and benefiting the Montreal Children's Hospital as well. Thanks so much, Terry. Take care.
Thanks very much.
When we return, Mirabel residents worried about the high-speed rail project. That's next.
Canadian women are looking for more out of themselves, their businesses, their elected leaders, and the world around them.
And that's why we're thrilled to introduce the Honest Talk podcast.
I'm Jennifer Stewart.
And I'm Catherine Clark. And in this podcast, we interview Canada's most inspiring women.
Entrepreneurs, artists, athletes, politicians, and newsmakers, all at different stages of their journey.
So if you're looking to connect, then we hope you'll join us.
Listen to the Honest Talk podcast on iHeartRadio or wherever you listen to your podcasts.